Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about a concept called tribes as it applies to Marvel, and more specifically Marvel Future Fight. But before we get into that, I have a small announcement to make. They didn't really announce it in-game, and they usually don't, and there's not a lot of time left. There's only about a day left, so if you need to change ISO weight sets, they are 50% off right now. As you can see, it's only 5,000 gold per roll instead of 10,000. So I know on my free-to-play account I'm going to be blowing a few million gold trying to get the right ISO weight sets for characters. So I just wanted to give you guys that heads up, that little tip there. If you want to make sure or check for yourselves, you can always tap on the little bar, the black bar with the yellow text above Iceman and Storm and Jean Grey, and then from there you can look and see what events are in progress and what events are upcoming and things like that. So we have the X-Men Epic Quest bioacquisition, even though it's got Spider-Man there on the front. That's active for another 9 hours. It's probably done by the time you're watching this video. Anyways, talking about tribes in Marvel Future Fight, and this is something that I've talked about in the past, but it's become more important, and it's become clearer that Netmarble wants to address this in some way with the first update for this year, which is Fantastic Four. Unfortunately, they haven't really done much to continue the trend that they set with the Fantastic Four update, and that kind of confuses me because we've already had 2 X-Men updates since then. I have a hair that's like dangling in front of my eyes. We've had 2 X-Men updates since then, and one was X-Force themed, and one was now kind of Uncanny Disassembled, X-Men Red themed. And so having these kinds of themed updates, especially with X-Men, but then taking or not taking the right cues from what you've done correctly and successfully in the Fantastic Four update really confuses me. So what I'm basically talking about is the idea of tribes within Marvel Future Fight, which are characters who relate to one another very heavily. Characters with really strong connections, whether they're connections of family, whether they're connections of like longtime friends, or whether they've just been allies for so long. So, you have pretty obvious large umbrella categories like the Avengers. So you wouldn't really want the Avengers to be necessarily a tribe because there's been, possibly hundreds of characters, and in this game there's maybe like 50 characters who have been Avengers, so it might be too all-encompassing. But you might still want to introduce something for the core Avengers, kind of from the original MCU, or the original Avengers from the original one. I'm talking like Giant Man and shit, and then combine that with the Avengers from the new kind of era, from the MCU, from the movies rather than the comic books. But more importantly, more accurately, I'm talking about tribes like, the Brotherhood of Evil, tribes like the Asgardians. That's a really big one and a really important one in Marvel Future Fight. And we had an Asgardian update 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago actually. Tribes like the Inhumans, who are brought up multiple times per, not multiple times per year, but at least once per year with the kind of X-Men versus Inhumans sort of thing. And with the latest update, we have new dialogue in the Bishop Dimension Rift that mentions the Inhumans, that mentions the Terrigen Mist, that mentions X-Men, X versus A, or I versus X, or whatever the hell it's called. Inhumans versus X-Men. You have Defenders. You've got the series, the Defenders, and you've got the characters all in the game. You've got Spider-Verse. We've had an update about Spider-Verse, and we have tons of Spider-Verse characters in addition to the villains. You can call them Spidey's Rogue Gallery or whatever. You can just include them in the Spider-Verse. Even smaller ones like New Avengers. You even have like Halloween-themed characters like the 2 Ghost Riders, Werewolf, characters like that kind of fit that sort of little niche, like Green Goblin, although he also fits into the Spider-Verse. And then you even have Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and that sort of tribe. And what I really want to see more of, and I don't understand why Netmarble doesn't capitalize on it, is making updates around those tribes and pushing them as sort of a new mini-team bonus. And this is really where Netmarble would, benefit from copying. Copying and pasting isn't always good in mobile games, and especially when we release a new character and you see, oh, well, this character actually has that character's 5th skill, and that other character's 3rd skill, and that other character's 1st skill. That's not always great because a character might feel less original because their skill animations, have just been recycled so many times. But when it comes to things like Thing, when it comes to copying very closely or loosely copying his Family Man passive, I don't understand why one of the X-Men in this update, or one of the X-Men in the previous update, wasn't given this passive. Why wasn't, let's say, Warpath as one of the leaders of the X-Men and big part of the X-Force, why wasn't he given a passive like this? I understand that not every character fits the support tag, but it doesn't have to just fall onto bad characters, i.e. Coulson and Valkyrie, and then characters like Ben Grimm. Additionally, the ability tag which applies not only to his passive, but also to Mr. Fantastic's leadership. Why hasn't that been further developed in the game? A pretty easy patch could change Magneto's leadership to apply to mutant allies, and then the mutant tag, rather than being something that's on the ally, it could be part of their ability, and you could apply that to uniforms, you could apply that to new characters, and it would just create a lot more flavor and a lot more interesting matchups with characters and in team-ups. So I'm just really confused, not really confused, but I'm just kind of confused as to why Netmarble will, gladly copy and paste in some areas of the game, but refuses to do so in the way that I think people would love the most, which is to have a more compelling reason to build up groups of characters. Odin, part of his rework, or even before a rework, could just get a pretty simple change, adding an effect to his passive that gives all Asgardians on the team some sort of additional buff. That would immediately improve the value of Thor, and it could also improve the value by extension of any other Asgardian character that you want to use, whether it's Angela or Loki or Sif or one of the Warriors 3 or Jane Foster and so on. And so it's confusing, and it's something that I think is really easy for Netmarble to capitalize on, because we have such a large roster of characters, and finding more connections for these characters rather than creating characters who have no connections is really what they should be doing. And you can even see it in something like the team-up bonuses, where they introduce new characters and they have like a few team-up bonuses. This Iceman is actually pretty good, but then you have other characters that are introduced recently, and they basically don't have any team-up bonuses, or they have very, very few team-up bonuses, and it's just kind of confusing, and it kind of begs the question of, like, well, what's the point? You're creating this character and you're putting them on an island. How are they supposed to interact with, I know we only have teams of 3, and it's not teams of 4, teams of 5, but still, you want the characters to interact with one another, and you want there to be interplay between them. And with a roster this large, you want to encourage, proximity building. So rewarding people, for example, they've done this in some ways, but not in the ways that necessarily matter to the majority of players. So for example, I'll give you guys an example of where Netmarble has used this kind of tribe idea and they've executed it. And I'm not going to say they executed it well, but they definitely executed it. You go to the uniform and you go to the uniform collection. These are the tribes that I'm talking about. These are a little bit more specific because, these are Avengers Infinity War, so this is directly pulling from the MCU, whereas this is Avengers Endgame, this is X-Force. I mean, this is only a fraction of the X-Force team, but we've got, Part 1 and Part 2, Captain Marvel MCU, Doctor Strange MCU, Disassembled, and so on and so forth. So yes, they are doing it to an extent, but why only have it as a static, reward that you get for mythicking the uniforms? This is just kind of there. It's not really something that's active. It's not something that impacts the gameplay at all. But they can take these ideas and they can apply them to the game, whether they apply them through team-up bonuses, which are probably the easiest and kind of least interesting ways to do so, but they could do it through team bonuses, or in my opinion, it's much better to do it through tier 2 or 4-star passives, like we see with Thing, where he applies a buff to all Fantastic Four members, and then also having that apply to and have it linked to the abilities. And I think the abilities are super underused because there's so much flavor here, but then it's really not utilized properly, and then it just ends up being a small buff that no one really cares about or looks forward to. But it was done so well for the Fantastic Four, which is kind of annoying because I wish they would just do it again. Imagine if She-Hulk, She-Hulk's not the best example, but and to be honest, She-Hulk, Crystal, and Moon Girl all have their own self-buffing leaderships. But let's just say for a moment that She-Hulk doesn't have a leadership. How much better does she now get, and how much better is it to build up Mr. Fantastic if you love She-Hulk? Not necessarily you love Mr. Fantastic, but if She-Hulk doesn't have her own leadership, how amazing is it that you should build up Mr. Fantastic because She-Hulk has the Fantastic Four ability, and she can take advantage of that 60% all-attack buff from Mr. Fantastic. She can take advantage of the super armor and the all-defense and the all-attack from Thing. Do you see what I'm trying to say? And so even though you might not have much interest at all in the Fantastic Four, if they had created it, they did create it in such a way where if you just have attachment to one of the characters, any member of the Fantastic Four, or any of these three characters, Crystal, She-Hulk, and Moon Girl, then you will want to build up multiple members. And they could even have additional bonuses for having specific members on the team. So right now we have this kind of generic bonus, this, 3 6-star characters. This is such an old bonus. This is from 2015. And this is obviously, it's so old that they don't even reward you for having tier 2 characters. It stops at 6 stars. So this is before tier 2 was even introduced, obviously before tier 3 was introduced. Why isn't there a greater bonus than just 333 for having all tier 2s? What if this bonus could change or get better if they were all X-Men, if they were all Avengers, if they were all Asgardians, if they were all Inhumans, if they were all Fantastic Four members? So you could take any 3 of those members, mix and match, and you get a bonus. You could even create unique bonuses that do unique things. Let's say if you have 3 Fantastic Four members and one of them is Human Torch, then you have your whole team has a 50% chance to be immune to fire damage. That could create some interesting combinations, and again, it encourages the player base to build up the entire team, the entire community, the entire tribe of characters, rather than just picking the best ones based on tier lists and guides and just ignoring all the rest of the characters. So I really think this is a huge untapped well for Netmarble, and I've talked about it in previous videos, but I wanted to make another one just because in addition to everything I've said, pretty much all of these tribes that I've mentioned, the Asgardians, the Inhumans, the Defenders, the Spider-Verse, the New Avengers, the Halloween characters, and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. are trash. Besides a few specific characters like Thor, possibly Odin, Medusa, Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2099, besides a few characters, the vast majority of those tribes' characters are trash, or just, severely underpowered characters. I mean, Sif is not trash. She's not a trash character, but she's much, much worse than a lot of the other characters out there in the game, and she could definitely use a buff. And these buffs don't even have to be to her. You can make her better by making another one of the Asgardians better, or even introducing a new Asgardian character and giving them some sort of way to buff other Asgardians and make them stronger by proxy. Mr. Fantastic is good, but he would be probably a lot worse in most people's eyes, and he would probably be worse in my eyes for PvE if you couldn't give him things, bonus. If you couldn't give him the super armor, because he gets guard broken a lot, he doesn't have invincibility, and so you would say, well, Mr. Fantastic's pretty good, but you can't use a CTP of energy or rage because he's going to get guard broken in PvE, so you need to use a CTP of destruction or whatever. You need to use an obelisk with guard break immunity. But because Thing has this, he actually buffs the value of Human Torch, Invisible Woman, and Mr. Fantastic, in addition to those other characters that I mentioned, like especially Crystal and Moon Girl, because She-Hulk already has super armor. So I just wanted to put this out there for you guys. I know you guys like talking about the different groups in Marvel Future Fight, and I know that there are a lot of you out there with comic book backgrounds who really enjoy building up teams and seeing that sort of group come to life piece by piece. I'm creating the original X-Men team, I'm creating the New Avengers, or I'm creating whatever kind of team, and so I wanted to bring this up, and I wanted to just point it out to Netmarble because there's so much that they could just copy and paste and people would still love it. And it would breathe a ton of new life into old characters, into characters that desperately need reworks, and it just gives a lot more longevity to the game. And then you can have more of these flavorful updates where it's all X-Men themed. You could have an all Asgard theme update and just do those kinds of things, and people would eat it up, and I think people would pay for it. I personally would. So let me know what you guys think of the tribe rework idea and kind of using the Thing example and the Thing kind of prototype to proliferate more of these types of characters, and what you think also of the kind of team up idea to change those bonuses. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again later today. Take care.